So hi, I'm Mary Kurek, and once again, we are in an investor/advisor interview, and we are doing this with Frontrunners Innovate magazine. So Jody Ranck, thank you so much for allowing us this time with you. And wow, as I tell people that I've talked to about you, what kinds of cool things that you have been involved in terms of disruptive technologies and how you're applying it to health. Now, your current role is Executive Vice President, Global Strategy for RAM Group, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But in your background, you have been sort of a leader in lots of different sort of innovative spaces. So would you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, and thanks for having me. So my background, I'm sort of a hybrid of a very interdisciplinary kind of person. I started out in molecular biology. I was a bench scientist, biochemist, then went off into international relations and economics. And I did my doctoral work in the School of Public Health at Berkeley, but I'm also I did a lot of work in anthropology. So a lot of my early work was in human rights in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide. And then around 2000, I began focusing on technology because while I was working in Rwanda, I was at that moment when in the course of 6 months' time, mobiles started popping up in Rwanda and throughout Africa in general. And we, kind of immediately saw that there's something big happening with mobiles. So that's what I focused on for pretty much the next 10 years. And now I've, moved into, with RAM Group, that's a sensor-based company, but these are all things that deal with that so-called mobile revolution that began about 23 years ago. And I'm building on that and how to leverage that in healthcare.
You've developed a strong expertise in that area and use that expertise to kind of share it through publication format. Tell us about the books that you've written.
And so that first book I wrote was back in like 2012, 2013. I did that with GigOhm, which at the time was one of the largest tech blogs out there. Unfortunately, they went under, but I covered mobile, mHealth, so-called big data analytics, smart cities, things like that. So I took that as an opportunity to think about how cloud computing, mobiles, and data analytics would come together and help us create more sort of predictive models and more real-time types of interventions that you could do on it with the mobile phone. And then in 2016, after looking at how a lot of the mHealth interventions, especially in places like Africa and so forth, you had a lot of fragmentation and disparate, like lots of different pilot projects. I mean, the first 7 or 8 years of the mHealth Summit, for example, all we did was sit around and talk about pilotitis. And, and so I began looking at how could there be new types of business models based on cooperation rather than just competition or co-opetition, whatever you want, however you want to call it, in the standards and sort of commons-based infrastructures that one could think about to create a more dynamic ecosystem rather than just one-off companies. And at the time, that was like sort of the nascence of these, or a few years into these platform economies. So I was more interested in, rather than a Facebook or a Twitter, could you think these platforms in more like a co-op type of framework or a commons-based approach that could just develop lots of good companies providing better healthcare. So that was sort of the idea behind that. The reality of that is, I think, it's people are still working on it, and I actually think it could provide a better model. But with these monopolies in the market like Facebook, it's hard to bootstrap something up that would compete with them. But I do think at some point in the future that may be a viable model.
So that's interesting. So what would you call that model? And I mean, you gave it a few different names, but how would you frame it now?
Well, since then, there have been numerous writers, from Trevor Schultz and others, that are looking at platform cooperatives and things like that. And I do think there's a hunger for an alternative to the sort of monopoly meta platform like Facebook. And along the way, I was involved. There was a cooperative digital health startup in Switzerland I've been involved with off and on over the last 5 or 6 years called Health Bank, which is a co-op, kind of citizen-owned co-op health data transaction platform. It still is yet to take off. But I do think, I like to have some tentacles in that type of thing because, I'm concerned about the way health data is often appropriated and used beyond the control of patients and citizens, and like more equitable sharing of the benefits of our health data. Like why is your health data in your EHR appropriated by other parties, and yet you end up paying so much for your health care in the US? Yeah. There could be other ways to address this. So I think I'm interested in exploring that and giving those other options a chance.
You see me looking down, I'm writing people's names down that I need to connect you to. Because there's like 3 just came to my brain right there, and that's what I do. But
that's one of the reasons I got involved in blockchain too, one of the other areas, because, to give them, because that could provide a way to give people control over their data and who they share it with and how it's monetized and things like that. I've backed off a bit because I think blockchain's pretty immature. So for me personally, I backed off to let's see how the infrastructure develops, because it's more of an infrastructural thing that takes longer, and then see where it goes and who comes out on top, and then look at some point in the future how either my company with Ram Group or others I work with, we could engage with that again. But I'm not like directly involved with it as much as I used to be.
That can happen again. I just wrote down another name. So thank you. The more you talk, the more names are going to happen. The whole purpose, though, of talking with you today, and I want to get to what the RAM Group is doing first. So I want you to share a little bit about that first. But let's dovetail it, back end it with how innovation like that, very disruptive innovation, because I think that's what RAM Group is really up to right now. How innovation like that gets to the market, and what are some of the hoops, challenges, or whatever you see, and that maybe could help other innovators and founders out there who are in that sort of space in health and wellness, that maybe that they founded something that's really going to be dynamic in the space. So talk to us a little bit about RAM Group first. So
RAM Group, we're a so-called next generation biosensor company. And what that really means is most, probably 97, 98% of all the sensors on the market are still based on the silicon wafer semiconductor industry technology. Over the last 10, so we were founded by Ayal Ram, who is a serial entrepreneur and had 2 exits in his 20s and made quite a bit of money. And then he came down with cancer, and they had missed it for 1 year. And by the time they discovered the cancer, he had a 5% probability of survival. And so he spent the next 18 months and quite a bit of his own money to survive that cancer. He beat the odds. And after he survived that, he decided he wanted to build the world's best sensor company. So over the next several years, he placed multiple bets on different research labs around the world that were working on various sorts of sensor technologies, diagnostic technologies, and it actually took quite a number of years. This was not, we are not an overnight success by any means. We're now 10 to 11 years into this, but about maybe 6 years ago or so, he really started putting his backing behind a group working on gallium nitride as this combination of material sciences, chemical engineering, quantum physics, and so forth, to create a sensor platform that is based on gallium nitride rather than silicon. And these sensors turn out to be anywhere from 1,000 to even up to 1,000,000 times better signal to noise ratio than silicon. So many things that sound quasi magical, or like often when we show people what we can do, they say that's impossible. And they say that's impossible because their heads are on silicon and our heads are on gallium nitride. And the leap in many of the characteristics and capabilities that we're able to accomplish, they're orders of magnitude better than what you can do right now on silicon. So that's sort of the basic innovation. And then off of that, these breakthroughs in material sciences with gallium nitride, we're developing a number of different medical applications, environmental applications, there are industrial applications. I think there's truly going to be an entire economy that, just like you have a Silicon Valley and the revolution that silicon produced, it's quite capable that we will see something along those lines, and who knows what the order of magnitude that will be, but entire economies based on gallium nitride, just as we've seen with silicon and some of the breakthroughs we've created.
Yeah. Well, it took a long time to get there, from what you're saying with the gentleman. And there's, you were talking to me about some other innovations that are kind of spinning off from this sort of base that you guys have going on. Aim me in the direction of where the most impact is going to land with what you guys are doing.
So the first thing the world will probably hear about in the coming maybe month or two, if all goes well, is we've produced what should be the existing diagnostics for bacteria and viruses. In COVID-19, for example, they're all based on biology. And one of the challenges we're having right now is supply chain issues with reagents, the accuracy of these diagnostics, and so forth. So we've created what it's called our THEA platform for COVID. That's the first diagnostic platform that's really based on the semiconductor industry and quantum physics, essentially, where we're able to identify COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus using spectroscopy. No PCR, no lateral flow immunoassay at all. So we can take the same swabs and we brush them on you wipe it on a cartridge. It's pretty much like akin to a microscope slide, and it has these gold nanochannels in it, and we put it into a handheld device, and in under a minute we can give you results for COVID. And soon once that generation 1.0 device hits the market, on the tail of that, we hope to have a breathalyzer that will give you results in 30 seconds that you could use for mass screening in the workplace and airports and airlines. And that's what we think will be the real game changer from this THEA platform we have. Simultaneously, we're coming out in Germany right now with our first air sensors. It's called Q Air Sense. And a lot of the existing air sensors on the market, they're basically detecting indirectly through algorithmic enhancement of what the sensors detect. And they can't detect at the single parts per billion that regulators require. So we've developed something that can detect in single parts per billion, and we've been miniaturizing it. So a lot of the air sensors that can do what we do, they're the size of a delivery van. And we have brought these down to, about a little bit bigger than a shoebox, or like the box that you'd put boots in, maybe. But our goal is to bring it down even smaller and smaller, and eventually, you could have it in a wearable device. And then the other innovation we have it's really a breakthrough. This is what we thought was going to be our first product on the market, is our single point monitor to monitor vital signs. So we can touch a single point on your body, and you get your heart rate variability, EKG, continuous blood pressure, and we can also get your right atrial pressure, which right now requires a catheterization where they implant a sensor in the heart. And we get all of that same data just from touching a single point on the body. So this is like years ahead of what is in your Apple Watch or any of the devices on the market. And that we are now just completing that and are beginning our go-to-market strategy with that, like, imminently. So that's like this whole the biological sort of healthcare medicine related applications we're developing.
Busy. That's awesome.
We're excited.
Since you mentioned go-to-market strategy, you've done this a few times before, I think, or have certainly been involved in the processes. So for those founders out there, what can you tell them about the process when they're inventing something that is so disruptive in the industry? I mean, how different is it? What are the challenges for you as you're moving this along? What steps are the key, I guess you would say?
I've found many cases things often took a lot longer than we thought, and that process is bringing all of these various sensors to market. It's been painful at times. It's been, you really have to have teams that are committed to the, almost evangelical zeal to hang in there and stay in the labs when, we run out of funding and need to go a month or two without paychecks to get things done. We've done it, and we've lost very few people. So the main thing is, investing in people really committed to the technology and the vision of the company. I think that's been one of our key successes. And then, our founder has this sort of interdisciplinary way of being in the world where, most of the people with us, they can study up very quickly on new disciplines, integrate it, and get it into a product very soon. So like we were in the rolling out our single point monitor for wearables when COVID hit. And we basically, discovered some articles using the types of sensors we were using, some work done in a lab. And that was March. And here we are, July, and we almost have an entirely novel new diagnostic platform. So that pivot to seize on an emerging opportunity, we were nimble enough to, keep the other things going, keep them alive and keep them chugging along. But we recognized this was an unprecedented opportunity, that we had something very unique and novel that was going to be hard to compete against. So we made that pivot. It has taken longer than we originally thought, which when you think about it, 3 or 4 months to create a physics-based diagnostic platform that doesn't exist in the market to challenge PCR and immunoassays, that's not a lot of time. But it feels like that to us. But, there's been a lot of learning as we go and finding our way, because, it is in some ways, some aspects of this are uncharted territory. So your threshold for risk has to be pretty damn high compared to a lot of other folks. And, and we're scrappers. That's the thing. Like it's, there's no big plan often, but, when we decide to pivot and go for it, and we may not have all the money in line, but we find a way to make it work. So it's very messy. I'm not going to deny, we're not some company that had, Jeff Bezos behind us and Google. I mean, we've gotten to where we've gotten with fractions of the amount of capital that some of the competitors that, like the Verilys of the world, we've gotten further on a fraction of the amount of capital. And I think in retrospect, in some ways, having less capital, I think has forced us to be a lot more creative and innovative in some ways. And some of the barriers and obstacles we've encountered that at the time just felt almost traumatic when they delayed things by a year or 6 months, and you're desperate for capital. We've ended up building a much better product out of what we learned in the process. So it's this constantly learning as we go and making things better, even when there's a mistake made or things don't come out the way we want. We've come out of it better each time.
So when you think about going to market, we in business development world, we kind of think of low-hanging fruit whenever we're talking about a project. Where do you launch? I mean, do you think in terms of globally, or do you find the pocket that you feel like has the most opportunity for you and you launch in that region?
We have a mix of strategies, I think. So our air sensors we found, we're based in Germany, and we found through our social networks, folks that had the contacts in a city that wanted to be like the leading smart city in the EU. They were open-minded and looking for the best and the brightest in the air sensor world. And we got inserted in, and now, we have a pilot going up. With our COVID diagnostics, we're very opportunistic, where, it's largely through social networks that we know people in different government agencies around the world that were, kind of going in there first, refining and getting things. We don't want to have this scenario where our diagnostic gets in the market where we make a claim that the accuracy is at 99%, and then in the wild it drops to 50%, as we've seen with some of these diagnostics. So we're looking for things where we can then, we've refined, we've learned that, environmental conditions, for example, affect the results. So then we, fine-tune the apparatus. So we have to find, folks that we can go in and do these experiments with and trials, and then, make the platform even stronger from doing a lot of testing rather than, so like a lot of the companies that introduced diagnostics in the last few months, they use spiked samples in pristine conditions of a lab. We've been doing a lot just in the wild, from sick patients where you could have cross-reactivity with multiple viruses, carting the samples over the mountains in the heat and humidity, and seeing how does that affect the results that we get. And it does affect the results. So we can then go recalibrate. And so then before we really go live with it, we know what we're dealing with in the wild. And so that's, being opportunistic, where we can continuously improve the product and then roll it out in a massive scale through, the investors we have, their contacts, through our contacts, and various ministries of health around the world, or, departments of health at the state level, and so forth. So it's, and then once we get that momentum, I think once the world sees what we can do, then our main challenge is going to be manufacturing enough to keep up with the demand. And that's the next challenge we have to figure out. So.
Fantastic. I mean, you guys are doing some really cool things there, and really impactful, projects that you've got going on that are really going to change people's lives and change actually healthcare the way that we know it, especially when it comes to these traumatic and disastrous sorts of pandemics and epidemics, that kind of thing. So thank you guys for what you're doing. And I look forward to another opportunity to talk to you. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. I can't wait for you to get to launch so that we can talk some more about what you guys got on.
We're getting there, almost there.
You are.
So.
Well, yeah, thanks again. And from the innovator standpoint and your advice, lean, stay nimble, stay connected to the people who are giving you money, and also don't rush the trial period, right? For anything that you're doing that has to do with the medical end of things. And pivot
our
if you need
real
to.
goal was to be out in April, and we've taken several more months, and it's all good. I think this extra, from when we started, the additional several months we've taken have all ended up being positive things for us. So if it takes longer and you get a better product, because you do not want to let people down in a pandemic. There's been enough of that, and we cannot afford to do that. That hurts the whole industry if you do that. So, being very responsible with how you develop the platform. And, I think there'll be a lot of regrets from companies who rush to market too fast.
Develop a lot of patience. Okay. There you go. Thank you again, Jody. I appreciate it.
All right, sure.
Appreciate it so much. Thanks.